I think we all know the story of when the Apostle Peter saw the Christ standing on top of the lake. Peter stepped out of the boat and began walking on the water out to him. And as he miraculously walked on the lake, he suddenly began to lose his footing and sink underneath the murky waters. And the reason for this sinking was caused by one thing: doubt. Why did you doubt? Is what he was asked. I think Christianity is very interesting and unique in this regard because, unlike many other systems, its major theme centers around this idea of doubt. There is no special technique, knowledge, or esoteric lifestyle required. All you have to do is believe, aka have faith, or simply put, eliminate doubt. I've come to understand that in some kind of way, this entire plane of existence we inhabit is made possible because of doubt. It is a domain of doubt. You see, the nature of doubt is a lack of trust or uncertainty. The uncertainty principle in physics is a living testimony to this fact. Doubt is fundamental to reality as we know it. There are all kinds of ways you can try to describe doubt. It is a lack of trust, uncertainty, disconnection, separation. The list goes on and on. In order to have a conversation about it without sounding too woo woo, I use the language of missing information. And missing information is something more akin to a state of being. This state of being is what the Hindus call Maya. It is a plane of multiplicity and difference, because on a fundamental level, that's what difference is: to be separate, not like anything else, or unique. And this word unique is incredibly important. Different is freedom. Terence McKenna called it novelty. It is freedom from homogeneity, uniformity, previous patterns, etc. But this also means that it is by definition the creation of privacy. This privacy becomes missing information, uncertainty, or doubt. And this doubt is what facilitates subjectivity. Descartes showed us precisely this by doubting. He doubted everything he possibly could, and as he did, the world around him began to crumble. Everything shrunk down until he was the only thing that was left standing on an island. This island is his own subjectivity, the one thing that he couldn't doubt: himself. I think, therefore I am. It is I amness. The Abrahamic God which appeared to Moses, referred to as Adonai by the Jews, I am that I am. Conscious self awareness, self reflection. The Gnostic proposition of thought thinking itself. I think, therefore I am. Or the universe experiencing itself, as the New Agers tend to say. Subjectivity is its own little universe. The existence of this universe necessitates a separation of sorts. There is a gap. I guess we refer to this gap as space. We say there is a space in between us, or missing information, as I call it. And you could say nature, this thing we all call nature, is the process of how this gap is bridged. I want to quickly announce a special project I'm working on. I'm making a premium digital experience where you are able to travel and learn the 3,000 years of history behind esotericism, where, as you progress, all the pieces are put together and the dots are connected. If you want early access, it's invite only. We will send the invite via email, so if you're interested, register at paramind.org. It's free. Once you give your email, that's all you need to do. This is the first thing of its kind. We're going to make history with this, so you don't want to miss out. Register at paramind.org. Link is in the description. Nature is some kind of a network, and we are like nodes within it. These nodes are connected via language. This is how the gap is bridged. It's pattern, connection, information, and relationships. Signal travels across this space to link or connect the nodes. In mathematics, these connections are called morphisms, but we will talk about that shortly. Now, on a fundamental level, language is the manifestation of thought. Or you could say thought is the fundamental language, or something like that. There is no difference between thinking something and it happening at the highest level of abstraction. And to the entity that is quote unquote speaking or thinking, it is indistinguishable from creation. It is the transformation of the unknown to known, or the manifestation of potential, as I put it. It is how nothing becomes something. This is what creativity is. God or consciousness or the foundational mind or whatever is doing just that, creating something from nothing. Potential is becoming manifest. Funnily enough, the name of the Abrahamic God Adonai can be translated as I am that I am, or that which creates. I've mentioned before that from the perspective of the imagination, nothing is real, including the things that we believe are real. But from the perspective of the Logos, everything is real, including the things that we only believe are imaginary. And likewise, from the perspective of the imagination, we are only remembering what was forgotten. We are rediscovering and never truly creating. But from the perspective of the Logos, it is creating as it speaks. It's sort of making it up as it goes along. However, speaking doesn't really just mean literal mouth noises, like how I'm doing now. Speaking for God, if you want to call it that, would be something akin to thinking. This is the closest word we currently have to describe it. It is thought, mind. And we are thought that thinks about thought itself, or the universe experiencing itself, or however you want to look at it. As I mentioned in previous videos, we are in an event space defined by infinity, and it's characterized by ignorance, the unknown, mystery, missing information, doubt. It is potentiality. Nature is systematically processing this potential or trying to illuminate this darkness. This is literally true when you look at our biology. Our physical bodies develop senses in order to try and illuminate this space. Just imagine how much information was missing before nature developed photoreceptors and eyes. The entire domain of light information was completely out of the picture. And even now that we can interact with light, it is still only a sliver of the spectrum. I'm sure, you've kind of heard this trope before. Interestingly, there is a big spiritual motif that we can't just seem to get away from. We can't help but be convinced there is a kind of all seeing eye. Most people call it, the truth or God or, a kind of perfect knowledge. Even atheists believe this. They just think that science will eventually uncover all there is to know, and rather than the bearded man in the sky, it will be us who are all knowing. It's still a belief in a kind of God at the end of the day. They just switch who's in the seat. It is some kind of, Faustian dream, Faustian powerless. It's the belief in a perfect form of perception which no information is able to hide from. Hide is the important part because, once again, it is all about this idea of missing information, hiding, and privacy. When Adam and Eve entered into their new form of consciousness after they ate of the fruit, the first thing they did was hide. They tried to hide from the all seeing eye. It was the creation of privacy. But it didn't work because privacy is some kind of an illusion. This plane of closedness, difference, and plurality is illusory. This is Maya. That's what the word Maya literally means. It means illusion. It's impossible to talk about this kind of stuff without mentioning the psychedelic experience. And one of the trademarks of the psychedelic experience is the feeling of oneness, that somehow everything is connected, but so connected that it is secretly one thing. I say it's infinite interconnectivity. People sometimes say in these states they can sort of be anything and be anywhere, and there is a reason for that. It's because the eschatological motif we see in every mode of thought, whether it be rationalist science with entropy, psychedelics, or plain old spiritual Armageddon, it is the removal of boundaries. This removal of boundaries, which I call the imagination, is echoing and reverberating throughout reality. You could even say it's traveling backwards through time, but we won't go full schizo on this video. This echo is manifested in many ways in the human metaphysical vision. For example, one of the common beliefs in some of these esoteric spaces is that human consciousness is evolving towards a kind of telepathy. That telepathy is some kind of latent feature of consciousness which they believe is being reactivated as we march forward. But if you pay attention, all telepathy is the removal of the privacy of your own thoughts. It is the removal of boundary. This idea of telepathy is like a lower dimensional slice or shadow of what's really occurring. Kind of how sweetness is only one aspect of a fruit, it's just a slice of it. I say instead of telepathy, it's something like empathy. You see, in order for me to communicate with you across this gap or space in between us, my thoughts have to literally be transmuted by reality as they pass through 3D space. They originate from a place which can't be described, and then they become bioelectric brain information, which is then turned into mechanical waves by the mouth. And if you're standing right in front of me, this process is reversed when it hits your ears. However, if we are using technology, it goes on an even more complicated journey as it travels through these varying electronic systems, computer chips and transistors and whatnot. This is a very clunky process. The clunkiness of this process is determined by how many interactions have to take place in between the beginning and end. It is the information in between us, the way that this gap is bridged. But in theory, if we could remove all of the mediums which separate my mind from yours, it would be the direct transmission of not just thought, but meaning itself. But the real catch here is that at that point, what's the difference between me and you? If I'm able to think all of your thoughts and have all of your feelings, then effectively I am you. This is true empathy, the ability to step directly into someone else's perspective. This is the same thing as becoming someone else. This inkling towards telepathy or this belief in telepathy is really just an echo of the imagination, this boundaryless state. We also see this, in the sciences with rather than telepathy, teleportation, the ability to just poof and be anywhere. It's all about information. You know what we've been doing as a species, you could say, we are finding ways for information to travel faster and faster. We were walking, then we discovered, domesticated animals, horses. Then it was the automobile. Now it's the airplane. You can hop in a plane and go anywhere. We are striving towards some kind of mode of being where information travels so fast that it really isn't traveling at all. This is all the imagination pulling us towards it. We are heading deeper into it, as I say. This boundaryless state is some kind of pure empathy. That's what empathy is really getting at here. We don't appear to be capable of true empathy. It is an ideal, kind of like love. We strive towards it, but always fall short, like how platonic forms can only be approximated. We view empathy as how would I feel if event A happened to me? True empathy is realizing that event A is happening to me because, once again, this idea of me is an illusion of privacy. This is why the greatest commandment given was to love your neighbor as yourself. However, there is a paradoxical catch. Well, maybe it isn't a paradoxical catch, but it's certainly disturbing. If you pay attention, empathy is a reenactment of death. To embody another perspective or to become someone else is to forfeit your own life. There is something about this concept of death that is doing something to us. It is always the big elephant in the room. We walk through the valley of its shadow. Death is maximum entropy, which is the loss of boundaries, which is the absence of identity. But I'm convinced that death isn't the end. Death is a kind of cosmic metaphysical junction that has everything to do with doubt. It is missing information, the missing information, the great mystery, and we are processing it. We are ultimately processing our own death. Our lives are the story of how we died. It is the transmutation of information from its origin to its destination, the information in between which connects the nodes. The same way that information has to go on a hero's journey from me to you, we are information that's going on a journey from the beginning to the end, whatever that is. The crazy thing is, somehow, we are the very thing we are afraid of. This is what the real meat and potatoes of this video is about. What I mean by this is there is a ghost which lies underneath the clothing of language, and this ghost is self identifying. I'll explain what I mean by this. Reality is pattern, connection, information, and relationships. This is my catchphrase at this point. And within mathematics, there is a new blossoming branch or field called category theory. It has become important in many different applications and disciplines like computer science, kind of how there is set theory, which is really pivotal in the area of statistics. I remember taking that in college. And obviously, something with the name like set or category theory rings off alarm bells in my head because sets and categories are how knowledge works. And within category theory, there is a concept called the Yoneda lemma. The Yoneda lemma essentially states that you can gain knowledge of something by knowing all of its interactions with other things. And when I came across this concept, I saw it was a great tool for illustrating the point I've been trying to make. People ask all of the time, what is the purpose of all of this stuff? All of the metaphysics and trying to figure out how reality works. What's the point? And I always thought this was an unfair question because the answer comes off as if you're trying to dodge the question, but the answer is you. No one can give you the answer because you are the answer, and it's not woo woo mumbo jumbo. It all circles back to identification, your identity, or as Carl Jung puts it, it is the realization of the self. I call it destiny. Perhaps it's all just another way of saying the soul, but this is what it's all about, manifesting your destiny. If we circle back to the Yoneda lemma, you can gain the identity of something by ascertaining all of its interactions. It's like a slick method of reverse engineering. To identify the subject, you fill in all information around it, like when you fill in all of the puzzle pieces until the last one is the only piece left. By looking at the gap, you can then see the identity of the missing piece. You see the outline or silhouette. This silhouette is the ghost I'm referring to that is wearing clothes. It is the clothing of language. It's missing information that is found by seeing how it connects or relates to everything else, by how it bumps into other things, like throwing flour over a ghost. These interactions are language. In category theory, they call them morphisms. It is how one thing connects to something else. Interaction is what it means for something to exist for us or to quote unquote happen. Remember, it is pattern, connection, information, and relationships. It is interaction, aka measurement, which collapses the wave function in physics. This is how possibility manifests. The reason why the one or the monad or the source is beyond our comprehension is because it is singular, or what we perceive as singularity. Radical otherness is the purest form of difference. It is the archetypal alien or UFO. It doesn't interact with anything, and that is a state of being which makes no sense to us, at least right now. It is completely free. I say it's free energy. Energy which isn't bound by language, but at the same time, complete freedom is total isolation, no attachment, anesthesia. We commonly experience this as loneliness. Now, as Descartes doubts, the world crumbles around him until he becomes an island. This is because relationships are like the actual paint on the canvas of our lives. I mean, I've personally experienced this. We all have. If you've ever moved anywhere new, you feel lonely because you have no relationships. You are sort of just existing in your room. There is no spark, no fun. You have to go out and fill your life with interactions because our lives are defined by our relationships to people, places, things, events. It's all relationships. This is how we know we exist. It's like the Yoneda lemma. On a more literal level, this is what senses are. I talked about this. You only know you exist because you have senses. Senses are how we interact, intersect, or bump into our environment. Without it, you have no capacity for any knowledge whatsoever. It would be a blank canvas, literal anesthesia, emptiness, or a ghost. I don't know what this ghost is, but this is what we are or where we come from, and it is where we are going. It is, as the ancient philosopher Plotinus says, it is the flight of the alone to the alone. There is a dualistic paradox between total empathy and complete isolation. But as you should know by now, the truth lies in the ooey gooey center. Life is the assimilation of otherness. I say it is the infiltration of the imagination into reality or the absorption of potential. The future is sort of being downloaded and concretized. This radical other is being processed bit by bit. Otherwise, it would be too much. Novelty is being systematically captured in this fractally configurated network of nodes. It is forming the living body of what we all refer to as the past, but I call it memory. The spooky thing about it is it's alive. An entity lives inside it, or it is the body of said entity, which I refer to as the locos. It's like the idea of form. In order for form to enter this domain, it has to put on a kind of spacesuit, like how we have to wear pressurized suits in outer space or our bodies will just pop. However, this suit that form wears is matter itself, or more accurately, language. Perhaps you can view it as processes. Maybe that, helps you conceptualize it. Form passes through a temporal dimension and dawns itself in processes like a suit. And when it exits stage left, it takes it off. You see this in the old ship of Theseus thought experiment. The reason why you can keep replacing the boards of the ship and have the same boat is because the boards are just the clothing that the boat is wearing. It's like a perfect case study in how forms work. If you suddenly took a giant ball, a giant wrecking ball, and destroyed the boat, the form doesn't die. Forms don't die. They are eternal, at least supposedly. What happens is it just no longer participates in time. It no longer exists in this temporal dimension. The processes it wears as its body fall apart. Time ends for it. And the same applies to us. When the processes of your body fall apart, your heartbeat, cell replication, your metabolism, when that stops, so does your participation in time, and the ghost is all that's left, or the form. This ghost is on some kind of cosmic adventure, and it is only passing through this temporal dimension, kind of like a liquid in a distillation apparatus. When it exits out of this temporal plane, to us it looks like death. But death is like a curtain that is hiding something behind it. This all has something to do with hidden information. If you want to say that death is a curtain which hides some other plane behind it, be my guest. This is kind of what people say takes place within the psychedelic experience, that you enter into some kind of post-death phase space or hyperspace. Dying, psychosis, the psychedelic experience, it's all related. They are siblings. For example, not knowing what day it is or the year or who's the president, these are all the main indicators of psychosis. And it's also a lack of participation in time. You are no longer wearing the processes which sustain the group body we call culture. The real explanation for all of these phenomena is the imagination. Some kind of way mind cannot see itself. It can only see itself in otherness, which is what the imagination is. It's like how you never actually see Mercury or a mirror. You only see what it reflects. And mind is trying to see itself for what it is via how it interacts with its own otherness. And it has been interacting since the beginning of time. The beginning of time is interaction itself. These interactions form the structure of our universe. We can see these interactions all the way down to the quantum language right now, but it's doing it on the level of human behavior as well. This is what most people still don't realize. We actually have a word for these interactions. We call them decisions. Decisions are how we interact. This is what it feels like to us. And decisions aren't just, these obvious dilemmas like the trolley problem. It's not like it has to be some fork in the road scenario where you have to choose left or right. You could say that those are just big or complex decisions. Decisions are literally everything you do. It's like a quanta of time or something. You could have paused this video to go make a sandwich, but you didn't. You can pick your nose right now, but you aren't, hopefully. Decisions are happening at every instance of time, and essentially, they are time. Decisions are attention, and time is like the rate at which you can pay attention, or how much information that can be processed at once. This is why time seems to behave differently when you are concentrating or having fun, etc. Time is a rate of change, and what it means for something to change is to notice. It is for your attention to be disrupted. Nothing happens until it is made conscious or brought to attention. I mean, that is how we phrase it. Each decision is like a relationship or connection you form with reality. It's how you bump into it. The sum total of your relationships and interactions is like a genetic sequence or a code which forms your identity. Your behavior is the language of your life. A simple way of putting it is your life story shows the essence of who you are. In Platonism, this is literally called the essence of an object. I mean, this is how they phrase it. All of the ways an object relates to its environment or the properties it had add up to create its essence. And this is something that we intuit naturally. When you ask someone to tell me a bit about yourself, they begin to tell you their story. They say, I did this, I tried that, I enjoyed this, I hated that. The yourself that you are trying to describe is the ghost. As you move through time, the architecture of this identity is constructed until it can no longer do so. Then it becomes your destiny, who you are. It was everything you did, thought, and felt. But it's probably the opposite. It's everything you felt, then thought, then did, because feeling appears to be the driver of the vehicle of behavior. It's feeling or emotions or meaning. I'm not really quite sure the best word to use here. I mean, when you really think about it, emotions are like the bookmarks for your life story. That's how you remember. You remember things and events which are associated with a feeling. You could call it biology's natural highlighting system. Whitehead talks about this process of concrescence. This is kind of what I'm trying to describe. Each interaction is a concrescence. I say it is the fruit of a possibility seed. He calls them actual entities. It's like out of the infinite ways it could have been, it was that particular way in that particular instance. These instances can be viewed as a node or a monad or a point or an actual entity or even a thought. I call them destiny. When something becomes, it actualizes its destiny. It is in the terminal state of maximized potential. It is the emergent property which springs forth from the totality of its interactions. You could say it has its own unique frequency, aka identity. I think a good way of painting this picture is color theory, pun intended. Did you know that there are actually an infinite amount of colors? That's how much variation there is in frequency, just like how there's an infinite amount of numbers between 1 and 2. 1.0001 is a color and 1.0002 is another color. Each number is its own unique identity that isn't like anything else. It is its own color. Even if you use Goethe's model, the way that color is derived is from interaction between light and dark. There are an endless amount of ways they can interact, and every interaction produces a new color because all interaction is novel. Simply put, it is impossible for anything to happen and for something new to not occur. This is why they are having so much trouble navigating wave function collapse in physics. The superposition is potential that hasn't manifested yet, so nothing happens until it does. Everything that happens is the manifestation of destiny. You could say every interaction gives birth to a new child. This child is the fruit of the possibility seed I keep referring to. It's something that is, and in order for it to be, it has to be. And being requires it to have an identity, to be unique, to have its own frequency and its own little universe. It's kind of like those oscillators. I don't know if you've seen them where they start slow or at a lower frequency and the image is hard to make out. As it speeds up, the image becomes clearer. This clear image or identification is made possible by the crystallization of the distinct parts. The nodes become connected and information is able to travel so fast that it looks like it isn't traveling at all, aka matter is frozen light, as David Bohm says. This light speed action forms a weird solid state like reality is a solid state drive. And I keep saying that the future is being downloaded. However, physics poo poos this idea away for somewhat of a good reason because whether he knew it or not, Bohm was actually talking about thought. It's not that matter is frozen light, matter is crystallized thought or exteriorized thought. Science has kind of accepted that matter is more of a philosophical concept rather than some quote unquote real thing. Thought or mind has something to do with the properties of light, but not light as in, literal photons. It's more so light as a concept, like matter. What matter is this boundless, radiant light being bound. I say it's like catching lightning in a bottle. It's locked into a pattern and it puts on clothes. I'm not one of these fancy philosophers. I don't have a strict dictionary of terms or formulate these vast, complex metaphysical systems. I tell you exactly what I see. I'm sort of just translating, I guess. You could call it the essence of an object, form, the soul. Heck, you can even call it your style if that helps you process what I'm telling you. It's your uniqueness. Remember that word? I said it was important. It is the identity or its whatness, what it's called. Somehow to name something is to create. It is an act of creation. Abracadabra, I create as I speak. In the beginning was the word, let there be, and there was. And the magnitude of this process is unfathomable. You see, one of the existential questions people have who make it this far in their journey is why do things happen to be the way they are when they can be any other way? It's because they are every other way as well. And this is when people start to talk about, the multiverse and what have you. But I think the multiverse is really more of a metaphor than anything else. It's kind of impossible to talk about this phenomenon without using linguistic tools like the many worlds hypothesis. I say we are in a field of infinite potential, which is seeding possibility. You see, anything can be virtually anything. It is mind which gives it its specific identity at any given moment. Once again, that's what a moment is interaction. You call it something and capture it in the net of language like a butterfly. For example, you can have a stick, but is it a stick? This stick can be a crutch or a cane, a weapon, a musical instrument, a tool. The list just goes on and on and on. Mind interacts with it as it desires in that instant. And in that instant, the object becomes its destiny, the thing that it is. And in that instance, it's nothing else. These objects or these actual entities are actually an emotion or a feeling or meaning. Remember, it was what the stick meant to you in that moment that determined its identity. After this interaction, the instance then becomes a part of the network we call the past. But I call it memory, and memory is like the psychic body of the logos. So, in the end, the logos is doing the same thing we are. It's processing emotions, complex emotions. This is what I mean when I say that the totality of your behavior collapses into a single object. That's what we do when we identify anything. All of its behavior forms a structure that is greater than the sum of its parts. I can only describe this process as it being some kind of harmony. It's like the name of a song or a piece of music is the identity of the entire sequence. Each note is its own identity, which harmonize to form greater identities. This is how language stacks and becomes super symbols. Notes form chords, which form chord progressions, which form songs, which form albums, and so on and so forth. To speak is to exteriorize meaning or feeling. The Abrahamic God created by speaking, but the catch is that each creation wasn't complete until it saw that it was good. It saw how it felt on the inside represented in front of it. It was some kind of resonance between the external reality and the internal world. The word then becomes flesh. It is taken from the inside and placed outside. It's as I always say, consciousness is turning inside out. That's another one of my catchphrases. Carl Jung phrases it as the unconscious becoming conscious. Consciousness is just attention, it is interaction to collapse potential into the actual. I'd say that the simplest way to define what the unconscious is, it's that which isn't paid attention to. It's something that hasn't been brought to attention, as I mentioned. It is the place that is outside of the bounds of time because no attention equals no time. The unconscious is the bottom portion of the iceberg that we don't see. And this iceberg is emerging from beneath the murky waters of doubt like a UFO, and the unconscious will be made conscious. The unseen will be seen. The forgotten will be remembered. All of the potential will be used up, and the imagination will become realized. And the form this will take, who knows? I mean, anyone who claims to know is probably some kind of snake oil salesman that's trying to get one over on you. I guess this event would be something like pure consciousness or, the singularity, the transcendental object, or perfection, or whatever. This is what I call the crystal palace at the end of time. All that will be left is the architecture of identity itself, a true identity, or the realization of the self, as Jung puts it, finding out who or what we are. And that realization is so startling, it scares us to death.